Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You've handed us a fascinating document this time. I mean, it's not a history text or some dense research paper. It's the strategic guide for an actual learning resource, the Listen to Feel English podcast guide. Alrighty. Usually we're mining sources for, historical facts or a scientific breakthrough. Today it feels like we're extracting something else entirely. A blueprint for learning and for learning fast. So our mission really is to distill the core method of this resource. We want to understand exactly how it promises to help someone, especially a beginner or an intermediate learner, achieve real confidence quickly. And the key word they use is naturally. So, okay, let's unpack this. Let's pull out the framework they're using to cut through the years of struggle.
That's a great framing because if you're our learner, you are just so aware that information overload is a huge problem. Speed and efficiency are everything. And language learning often feels so inefficient, right? You're bogged down memorizing things you forget the next day. So the focus of this guide isn't just on what they teach, it's the whole approach. They claim English comes to life, which, that implies a real shift from just academic study to something practical,
Yeah.
integrated. We really need to dissect that promise and see what the ingredients are.
Exactly. And that shift, it's right there in the title, Listen and Feel English.
Eh.
So I think that's where we have to start in section 1, this core philosophy. This isn't just listen and repeat, which we all know can feel so mechanical. The instruction to feel the language. That's the really intriguing part for me. What are they trying to activate that, that traditional grammar drills just miss?
Well, what's fascinating is how the source material basically positions this as an emotional experience, not just a cognitive one. When they prioritize listening and feeling, they are implicitly targeting what language researchers call the affective filter.
The affective filter. Okay, explain that for a moment, because that feels like a really powerful concept in this context.
Certainly. So in simple terms, the affective filter, Stephen Krashen made it popular. It's essentially an internal mental barrier. If you feel stressed, anxious, judged, or just not confident, which is how most adult learners feel, that filter goes up.
Like a wall.
Exactly, like a wall. And when that filter is up, even if you intellectually know the vocabulary, you know the grammar rules, your brain just blocks that input from becoming long-term. You can't use the language fluently because you're just too scared of failing.
So if the guide is focused on helping you feel the language and get confidence, it's effectively trying to keep that filter down. By making the learning experience comfortable, natural, and maybe even fun, they're allowing the actual language to stick, to move from short-term memory to a usable skill.
You've got it. Confidence is the currency of fluency. And they're using their whole methodology to generate that confidence right from the start. That connection between listening and feeling is the whole reason for their content choices. They have to deliver stuff that inherently lowers that filter.
Okay, so how do they do that? How do they translate this philosophy into content that reduces anxiety and actually generates feeling?
Okay.
The source specifies 3 key formats.
Yes, and they're designed for authenticity, not academic study. The 3 pillars are real conversations, short stories, and meaningful dialogues.
Right, and notice what's missing there. No technical lectures, no complex academic articles.
Exactly. By focusing on real conversations and stories, they're doing 2 things. First, they provide context, language that just makes sense in a social setting. Second, and this is critical, stories provide emotional hooks.
That's the feeling element, isn't it? When you listen to a short story, you're not just processing verbs and nouns. You're engaging with the plot, the character's journey, the ending.
Absolutely. Traditional learning often forces you to think cognitively, like, okay, this is a past perfect tense, I must conjugate it this way. Narrative just bypasses all of that. When you hear a story, your brain is focused on what happens next. The grammar and the vocabulary, they get absorbed automatically as part of that emotional journey. And that forms a much, much stronger memory than rote repetition ever could. The content choice is strategic. It's designed to be absorbed, not brute forced.
It's that bridge between knowing a word and understanding its weight or its context. That's where real confidence comes from, the ability to just use it spontaneously.
And that brings us perfectly into the practical mechanics of this deep dive, into section 2. If the philosophy is all about feeling, the next part has to be about the actual tools the guide gives you to make that happen. So when we move from the philosophy to the practical levers, the guide highlights 3 critical areas. These are the specific targets for getting better fast. Clear pronunciation, simple vocabulary, and real-life English you can actually use.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because those targets sound almost deceptively simple. I mean, focusing on simple vocabulary,
Yeah.
that raises a question. Aren't you just risking that the learner hits a plateau once they leave, basic chats? Doesn't simple sacrifice depth?
That's a perfect point of tension to raise, and the answer is in what they really mean by simple. This approach isn't about a kindergarten vocabulary. It's advocating for high-frequency utility.
High frequency.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at standard word lists, like the general service list, it covers something like 90% of non-technical English. Mastering a focused set of 2,000 or 3,000 core words gives you a massive functional ability.
So they're prioritizing the 2,000 words you need every day over the 10,000 you might need once a year for some specialized topic. It's optimizing the learning for maximum return on effort.
Exactly. It's efficiency over academic exhaustiveness. And by mastering that essential core, the learner gets fluent in common situations almost immediately. And that generates the confidence to keep going. It's the 80-20 rule for vocabulary. Now, you couple that smart vocabulary choice with the focus on clear pronunciation. And again, the simplicity here is strategic. They aren't asking for a perfect native-level accent. They're focusing on clarity, on intonation, on stress patterns, and on the English sounds that if you get them wrong, just derail the whole conversation.
I see. So the goal isn't to sound like you're from London or New York. The goal is just to be immediately and effortlessly understood. The rhythm and stress are often more important than getting every single vowel sound perfect.
Precisely. If you use simple high-frequency words and you stress them correctly in a sentence, you drastically reduce the cognitive load for both you and the person you're talking to. This is the very definition of real-life English you can actually use. It's the total opposite of that stiff, grammatically perfect, but completely unnatural language you find in textbooks.
It sounds like an intentional effort to model how humans actually talk, not machines. And the synergy between the content real conversations and the focus areas, simple words, clear pronunciation, it creates a kind of feedback loop.
That does.
You listen to an authentic conversation, you pick up on the high utility words and their stress patterns, and you instantly have a model you can copy without getting lost in some obscure grammar rule.
That immediate applicability is the hallmark of a system designed for a learner with immediate practical needs. The whole methodology is incredibly streamlined because every single component reinforces that one goal: usability.
All right, moving on to section 3. Let's look at who this is actually for and what the ultimate payoff is supposed to be. The guide is very clear about its target audience, which again, it reinforces that simplicity we just talked about. It says it's perfect for beginners and intermediate learners.
And that clarity is critical. Beginners need that foundational confidence from simple vocab and clear pronunciation. Intermediate learners, though, they often hit that fluency wall. They know the rules, but they lack the confidence to use them spontaneously in a real conversation. The exposure to stories and authentic dialogues is designed specifically to break down that intermediate wall.
So they're essentially providing the immersion experience without you having to, move to another country.
Yeah.
The authentic context is the environment where you stress test the knowledge.
And this leads us directly to the so what for the listener, the tangible, real-world applications. The source material spells out that this learning is valuable across 3 big domains. 1, for study, 2, for work, and 3, for daily life. This is important. It shows the skills are meant to be universally transferable.
Let's dig into that transferability point for a second. How does mastering a dialogue about, say, ordering a coffee actually translate into success in a work meeting or a university lecture?
It's all about the confidence and mastering the functional, connecting language. If you're comfortable and spontaneous using simple English in daily life, you have a solid base. In a work meeting, sure, the subject matter vocabulary might change, but the core conversational skills, how to interrupt politely, how to agree, how to disagree, how to use intonation to ask a real question, all of that remains the same. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, whole structure, clear pronunciation, high frequency, real-life English is all building toward that stated outcome, helping you listen, feel, and speak with confidence. They're not selling you grammar, they're selling performance capability.
Confidence is the glue, like you said. Without it, you might ace a multiple-choice grammar test, but you freeze up the second a real person asks you a question you weren't expecting.
Exactly. And to maintain that capability, you need consistency. The final logistical point in the guide is crucial. They release new episodes regularly, and we know from all our dives into learning that regularity isn't optional. It's the engine of progress.
Consistency combats the difficulty of learning a language, which just requires continuous exposure and use. The promise of new, fresh material takes the burden off the learner of having to go find new things to listen to. It stabilizes the whole English journey.
It's a very smart structural choice. It acknowledges that adult learners have limited time, limited cognitive bandwidth. They provide the curated content, which minimizes decision fatigue and maximizes exposure. You don't get fluent by cramming for one weekend. You get fluent by showing up consistently, absorbing the narrative, and letting that effective filter stay down.
The learner can just subscribe and know the resources won't dry up. It creates a real pathway for steady, low-stress progress. So pulling all these threads together now, we've analyzed the strategic approach of the Listen and Feel English podcast guide. We noted its core ingredients, real conversations, short stories, and its specific focus on high-utility vocabulary and pronunciation. And it's all designed to deliver confidence for study, for work, or just for daily life. So what does this all mean when we zoom out? What's the biggest takeaway here?
I think the final synthesis for you, the learner, is this. The resource emphasizes that quick, usable knowledge gain in language. That ability to perform spontaneously doesn't come from just hearing the words. It comes from the process of listening and actually feeling them come to life through story and low-stress exposure. They're building a path from understanding to confident execution. They're prioritizing the emotional connection over the academic checklist.
That emphasis on the sensory and emotional connection really is the shortcut. So if the goal is to feel the language to unlock confidence, we're left with a final provocative thought for you to consider based on these principles. If the goal is to feel the language, what other sensory or emotional connections are essential for turning newly acquired knowledge, whether it's historical data, financial strategy, or scientific fact, into long-term usable confidence in your own field? How do you lower the effective filter on the next piece of complex information you have to face? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into effective learning. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.